Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Self Transformation Radio. That feels so much better now. I'm finding it to be a lot easier to want to hop on and record episodes now that I have figured out what type of show feels best for me and really who I truly am now. And Self Transformation Radio very much embodies what I'm about in my life right now and hopefully forever, because this is work that really matters to me and has made an incredible difference in my life, and I've seen it make a difference in the life of my clients, and I just know that whoever's listening to this is going to get something out of it. So I am coming at you from a campground in a quiet town of Louisiana. It's a sleepy Sunday that I'm recording this, and we're getting lots of rain in the next few days, so I'm kind of coming to terms with the fact that I will be stuck in the van, and it's a lovely van. I say it every day, it's the best van ever, but I'm a little nervous about being stuck in the van during a rainstorm because, yeah, if I'm being honest, I really enjoyed being able to get out and exercise outside and work outside at my little picnic table campground office. But this campground isn't as nice as the Fontainebleau State Park where I had that picnic table office and everything. Oh well, lesson learned, I suppose. And if I really get uncomfortable, I can just leave. Sometimes I have to remind myself about that I'm not stuck anywhere anymore. This morning I was talking to my dad on the phone. We actually tried to video chat, but the signal just wasn't strong enough for that. Anyway, my dad is 76 years old, and he's always telling me that his ship has sailed, and he's glad that I'm doing what I'm doing, but that he's glad he ain't doing it with me. And this morning, he said that he's glad I didn't invite him on my trip, my van life trip. So we had a good laugh about that. And I said, Dad, no offense, but I never ever in a million years would have ever invited you into this van with me. But it's not just you, I said. I wouldn't have wanted to do it even with the love of my life either. Yeah, it's true. I traveled pretty often with my ex-husband, and I can remember how stressful it was for me. Everything had to be planned ahead of time, and there were always discussions about every detail and decisions to be made, and I had to consult somebody else whenever I wanted to go and do anything. And I feel like that's exhausting. At least where I am in my life right now. Because you might say, yeah, it's totally normal, Caitlin. That's what you do when you travel with someone else. And I get that. I live that. What I'm saying now is that traveling alone is sublime. It is otherworldly. There's just nothing like it that I have ever experienced in my entire life. I had no idea the freedom that existed beyond the fear that I had of traveling alone and doing something like this alone, or just being alone in general. If you're used to doing everything with somebody else, the thought of doing something or anything alone can be absolutely freaking terrifying. And I can remember shortly after my divorce being, absolutely terrified to be alone. And that fear drove me to do some dumb things, maybe not so wise things. I don't like using the word dumb to describe things I've done. It drove me to bring people into my life who never should have been there, who took advantage of the vulnerable space I was in, knew the fear I was feeling, and used it to their benefit. It was no good. And I can think of a particular now deceased individual I allowed into my life to help me manage my house, which is a large home in the Central Florida area that I had just moved into less than a year before that. Shortly after I divorced, I was like, I need help. I cannot do this on my own. And that's true. To this day, I have an assistant who manages the house with me after I learned how to do it myself. And we'll get to that in a minute because I ended up having to learn how to do it myself. It is not a one-person job. Managing a house like that is like Downton Abbey light, right? They had a whole staff, right? So a house maybe a 32nd of the size of Downton Abbey at, let's see, I'm at like 4,000 square feet. And if you count the outside area, it's quite a bit bigger than that. It's a lot of work for one person. It's a full-time job. But yeah, I allowed a particular individual into my life to help me manage the house after I divorced. And even though my instincts were screaming at me in every which way that this person was not healthy and should not be in my life, I did not trust myself than the way I do now. So it ended up being 2.5 years that this very creepy older man snaked his way into nearly every aspect of my life. My business, my personal life, he was in it. It was a very enmeshed type of codependent relationship. He was manipulating me in such a covert way that I didn't notice how his presence in my life was actually hurting me because I felt like I needed him. And it took him dying of lifestyle related issues during COVID to get him out of my life. When he died, I freaked out because I had no idea how to manage my, at the time, 6 rental properties or my house alone. I had let him manage everything because I truly didn't believe I could do it myself. And little did I know, and I would soon find out, just how poorly he was actually managing my properties and how little by little he was siphoning away from me financially, hoping it would go unnoticed. And for years, it did go unnoticed. And how he had been hiding from me his very unhealthy obsession with me that would, it would make anybody want to throw up. We'll just put it that way. I found all kinds of things saved on my computer that he was using that revealed the kind of person I always knew he was, but I just would not allow myself to believe. In fact, I spent those years convincing myself that I was a bad person for having such ill feelings towards this person, that I couldn't see him the way that he truly was. But it was shocking to uncover these things about him, but it's exactly what I needed to see in order to look back and say, wow, that whole time, that repulsion I felt whenever I was around this person, how I felt disgusted by every part of him, how he looked, how he smelled, how he spoke, that was my intuition trying to steer me in another direction away from this individual. And it was such a wild time in my life. Another time of my life that I am grateful for experiencing, for the wisdom that I gained from having experienced it. And I am now very discerning and careful about the type of person and energy I allow into my life. And I want to say, too, that I have never shared publicly anything about this particular person or experience. I suppose before now, I did feel an element of shame or maybe some kind of pattern I was stuck in or repeating where I felt that such things just needed to be kept to myself. But I feel that it's better to share openly and not hide such stories as these, because somebody out there, possibly even listening to this right now, may be going through something similar with someone in their life, whether it's a romantic relationship or some other type of relationship. That was what was so surprising for me, was that it wasn't a romantic relationship. Of course, he wanted it to be a romantic relationship, and that was what he was after. But it could be any type of relationship, and that's what can make them so sinister and can suck the life out of you. And it's been more than 2 years since he died, and I have seen myself blossom exponentially fast into the person I was already starting to become before he came into my life. And I can see how his presence halted that transformation for the entire time he was in my life. And that's why it's important for me to share it with you, because I see what removing that person out of my life, that person exiting my life, has done to help me. Yeah. Now, does that mean he's to blame for my suicidal depression during that time or episodes during that time? Of course not. Although I will say he wasn't helping. He was giving me his low-dose Xanax prescription before I got my own. And he believed he was helping me, but he absolutely was not. All that to say, I, of course, am responsible for my own actions. I can just say now, having been through such an experience, that when you're in a manipulative relationship like that, you do not see it when you're in it. I had people who I am still friends with today, people who knew him before I did, telling me that he was manipulative and not who he seemed to be, and that he had done this to other women before, but I wasn't able to see it until I was able to see it. And in this case, it wasn't until after his death. I went through all the usual stages of grief when he died too, as anyone would for someone that they're attached to. Despite my dislike of him, I had still grown dependent on him, so it was difficult to move on. But as I started to feel better and more confident in the months that followed his death, I had feelings of guilt about being happier without him and thinking that it was just short-lived because I had gotten so used to being unhappy and depressed and feeling terrible about myself. It started to feel like, is this real? Like, is this what's actually happening here? Am I actually getting better? Or am I, maybe having another episode or another episode coming on? There's all kinds of stuff going through my head. And I went through feelings of being glad he was gone. And of course I felt guilty about that. And while I'd never wish an untimely death upon anyone, no matter how much I was repulsed by them. And now, even 2 years later, I find myself feeling grateful that this person is permanently out of my life, that I never have to see him, hear him, smell him, or interact with him for any reason ever again. It's the best feeling in the world. And you know what? I know now that it's okay to feel that way. People may judge me for it, but I don't care because they aren't me and they didn't live through the experience that I did. They weren't in it. They will never understand the way I do about what happened and how I've grown from that experience. Yeah, so I want to encourage you, if any part of that story feels like it's hitting home for you, that it doesn't matter what other people think about it. It only matters what you think about it and what you need to do. Yeah, I see myself so much differently than I saw myself when this person was around. Who we surround ourselves matters so much, friends, and what we tell ourselves matters too, which actually leads me right into our question of the day. And that is, how do you speak about yourself? What words do you use? How do you feel when you say them out loud? How do you feel when you say them in front of other people? Are you able to say them in front of other people? These questions are important because they reveal a lot about us and how we see ourselves. In the last episode, I described myself as a strong, capable, radiant woman. And as I just described, there was a time in the not so distant past that I would have felt ashamed and guilty for saying something like that about myself. How dare I say something like that about myself? Compliments like that should only come from other people, right? What does it mean if you say kind words to yourself out loud where other people can hear you? It means you're bragging, right? Or it means you're conceited or full of yourself, right? That's what I believed for a long time. That's how I conducted myself based on that belief, and it caused me to shrink myself throughout my marriage, throughout my business life. What do I mean when I say shrink myself? Well, it's like I had this expectation that only others could compliment me, and if they didn't, then that meant there wasn't anything worth complimenting, which for a very long time influenced me to believe that I was a very ordinary woman. How many of us feel ordinary? Or raise your hand, right? Or have ever felt ordinary? Like, I have nothing special about me, right? And it's because we have this subconscious belief that if other people aren't telling us who we are, then we must not be anything special. But it's really who we decide to be that makes us who we are. So you can decide, I am not ordinary. I am extraordinary. And what that means to you is going to vary from person to person. But I can tell you that nobody listening to this podcast is ordinary. It's part of the journey, is that realization that, oh my gosh, I have lived like an ordinary person because I have believed I am an ordinary person. What would happen if I did not believe I was ordinary anymore? And what I didn't realize at the time when I believed that I was ordinary was that other people weren't really paying all that much attention to me. I'm not talking about people online, social media, loving the stuff I'm creating. I'm talking about people in my immediate inner circle, immediate family, some of which are not in my family anymore. The people you grew up around, the people that you've lived with for a long time, they have a perception of you that may not be entirely accurate. In fact, I can tell you it is not accurate because it's not you. They're not in your brain. They're not in your body. They don't feel you. They don't know you the way you can know you. So if you depend on their perception and validation, voiced validation, and their acceptance in order to feel good about yourself or to know who you are, You're going to be waiting a long time because people are paying attention to themselves. Everybody's paying attention to themselves. And there is a big difference between someone who says positive things about themselves publicly in order to get validation from other people versus someone who says it because they genuinely believe it's true and they act like it. So I believe I am a capable, strong, and radiant woman because I have been through the fire that made me that. I have a lot of evidence that proves it to me, and that's the only person I need to prove it to is me. And me being that and embodying that energy in my life without shame and without fear and without shrinking myself does not mean that other people are not capable, strong, and radiant. I feel like oftentimes what we do as women especially is we feel like if we are something, then other people are not something. Or if we have more in our lives, then it means other people have less. And that is not the way abundance works, people. And we're going to get to that in a later episode, all about abundance and what that means. So you might not know this about me, but I am a fraternal twin. I have a twin sister. We are fraternal twins, which means that we were just two completely different people born at exactly the same time, almost exactly the same time. It's not your traditional identical twins where there's one egg that's split into two and we share all the same DNA and blah, blah, blah. Our kids would be cousins if we married another set of twins or whatever. We're fraternal twins, very different people. But still, we were constantly being compared to each other by our peers because people would just hear the word twins and not believe us because we look different. It's like, duh, like everybody's ignorance kind of played against them back then. But this created a toxic dynamic between my sister and me for a long time because we internalized the drama that other people created. And we didn't know who we were as individuals. And it's hard when you're twins. It definitely has made it harder for me on my journey as an individual to realize that I'm an individual, and me being something does not mean my sister is not that or can't be that or that I'm better than her or that she's better than me. There's no competition and there's no real comparison either. So as I got a little bit older, in order to avoid conflict with my sister, what I started doing was shrinking myself around her because I felt like it was my job to protect her feelings, especially as my business grew. I was afraid of even speaking about it in front of her because I was still stuck on that belief that if I openly celebrated or spoke positively about myself, that it would cause someone else, in this case my sister, to feel bad, to cause them to have negative emotions or to be uncomfortable. And I felt like it was my responsibility to make sure that that didn't happen. And to this day, I still struggle with really being myself around my sister sometimes because I'm not sure how she'll react, and I want to avoid a negative reaction. So I'm slowly learning that it really doesn't matter what her reaction is because it isn't my responsibility. My responsibility is being true to myself and not hiding myself out of shame or fear or shrinking myself to protect someone else's ego from being bruised. And when I recorded the last episode and said out loud that I am a strong, capable, and radiant woman, I truly believe that about myself. And it's not like I'm going to go call up my sister and say that to her because that's weird and unnecessary. And what's the point? There's no point in that because it doesn't matter if anybody else knows it or believes it. I know it and I believe it. So when I said that on the last episode, it felt so good to say that. I thought to myself as I was saying it, wow, I finally don't feel like I'm lying to myself. That came out so naturally. But I was also conscious of the fact that I said it without feeling guilty or bad or ashamed or scared that somebody might judge me and think, oh, that person's really full of themselves, or who does she think she is, saying that she's strong, capable, and radiant. Like, look around me. Like, I'm living my dream life and I have created this for myself. Clearly I am strong. Clearly I am capable, and clearly I am radiating that. I'm a radiant woman. So it doesn't really matter what other people think, does it? So often we look at where we want to go in our lives and we're looking ahead all the time, and we don't look back and see how far we've come. But that is the only way to really measure progress, is by looking back and seeing where we've been and the distance that we have traveled. I know I'm not the same person as I used to be, like when I would have fights with my sister or when I had the toxic property manager. I have overcome some crazy things. I've overcome mental illness and cancer, for Pete's sake. And those are two things that the world tries to convince us are incurable life sentences and cause so many people to become victims for life. But I knew when I first received those diagnoses that I would never accept them as being part of who I was. They would never be part of my identity. And you could call it denial or disbelief if you want, but I call it refusing to settle. I refuse to settle for someone else's perception, definition, or diagnosis of me. And you listening to this right now, I want to encourage you to do the same. Refuse to accept someone else's assessment of your life's potential. Refuse to accept someone else's perception of your identity. That is up to you to create. And it's only up to you to believe in it. It's not up to anybody else. Because you are the most important person in your life. You get to choose who you want to be and drop all the rest of the nonsense that other people, well-intentioned but misguided as they are, will try to attach onto you. Because, yeah, there's people who believe it's their job to do that. But you get to choose. Only you get to choose that. Only you get to choose who you are. So you might have somebody in your life who thinks that by working on yourself and reprogramming your beliefs about who you are in the world, that you're just lying to yourself and trying to be somebody you're not. I have a person in my life who says, yeah, whatever you need to say to sleep at night, Kate, they might tell you that you're not fooling anyone. Let them think that. Just let them think that, because they are the ones who are afraid. The work that you are doing on yourself is challenging them. It's challenging their identity. And when people are in that state of fear, they are in a state of very low consciousness. And in that state of low consciousness, they will do anything to keep you where you are so that they stay comfortable and their world doesn't change. They want to stay the same, and in order for them to stay the same, they need you to stay the same. Does that make sense? So I want you to recognize that that is what's happening underneath the surface of these people who put you down for trying to be, do, and have more in your life. Don't let it stop you from continuing to do the work, the inner work. Don't stop believing in yourself just because other people don't believe in you. So, back to the question. How do you speak about yourself? Who are you? What is your identity? Who do you want to be? The answers to these questions matter, and they matter more to you than they ever will to anybody else. Because you're the main character in your life, and the people you surround yourself with should play supporting roles. If they're not supporting you, then what are they doing? Now, don't take that to mean you don't or shouldn't have any other roles. Maybe you've taken on the role of motherhood. That's a role. Maybe you're an employee right now and you're filling that role. The role I'm talking about right now is you, the you that is underneath all of those secondary roles. You are the most important person in your life. I'm going to say that to you more than once, over and over again. Until I'm blue in the face, I'll tell you, you are the most important person in your life. And I'm going to tell you the truth here, that if you do not put yourself first, no one else will. If you do not put yourself first, no one else will. No one else will. That is your primary and most important role in life, is to take care of yourself. Make sure you have what you need to thrive. Make sure you aren't attached to any energetic parasites who are there to steal your fruit, but not tend the garden. Take a deep breath with me now. Let's do it together. Say, I am safe with me. I trust myself. I love myself. Even if you don't believe it, say it with me. I love myself. Say, I am a strong, capable, radiant woman. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Thank you for tuning in to this episode today, my friend. I will see you in the next one.